Good morning, friends of the Museum of South Texas History. My name is Francisco Guajardo. I am the CEO of the museum here in Edinburgh, Texas. And we welcome you to the February edition of Museum Pláticas, February 2023. Today's show will feature a distinguished guest. Her name is Dr. Dahlia Guerra. She is a longtime professor and administrator and really just a world-class musician who has been at the university here. It's called the University of Texas Rio Grande Valley. Previous to that, it was the University of Texas Pan American. And so Dr. Guerra has been a mainstay and a very important actor within that institution for a number of years. And so today's program is ready to feature on Dr. Guerra as a person. So we're going to do a little bit of history work with her. So that will be in the upcoming segment. We will then go on break. Not sure how long that segment will be, but we'll try to do a little bit of depth on the life story of Dr. Guerra. We will go on break, and when we come back, then we will focus on Festiva. Festiva is a very important conference that Dr. Guerra has been organizing for a number of years now. It's probably going well into its second decade. I think it is, maybe 16, 17 years and running. And so it's become a very important place to really focus and feature the arts, literacy, and other kinds of disciplines where she brings people together. She brings the schools together, artists together, authors and other folks who come together to really talk about literacy and the arts here in South Texas. So segment number one is this one, just an introduction. Segment number two, a brief kind of oral history of Dr. Guerra. Segment number three, we'll talk about Festiva. So stay with us. Thank you very much for joining us in this edition of Museum Pláticas. Okay, welcome back, friends of the Museum of South Texas History. So, as promised, I suggested that we would have Dr. Dahlia Guerra on the program today for Museum Pláticas. And so this is Dr. Guerra. Good morning, Dahlia. How are you?
Thank you. I'm great, and thank you so much for having me.
I know that a lot of the world knows who you are. You have been such a distinguished, I think, just pioneer, innovator in the arts in South Texas that has had a real impact, not only in the region, but I think on the state for sure, but very likely nationally as well. So I want to get to some of that in a bit. But first, I think that the community would do well to know who you are, where you're from, who do you come from, Dahlia Guerra? So tell us a little bit about where you were raised, who your parents were, that sort of thing.
Okay. Well, I was born in Edinburgh, and my parents were Canuto and Elida Garcia, loving, fabulous parents. And I have two brothers, Bobby and Richard Garcia. And we grew up listening to my dad's war stories because he was a war hero, volunteered World War II, 17 years old, bottom turret gunner of a B-17. So we were always very involved in being patriotic. And so I remember that very strongly in my childhood. All the air shows and that sort of thing. So that was a big influence in my life. So my daddy decided when I was born that I would be a pianist. That very day he told my mother, and my mother has told me this, she's going to be a pianist. So dicho y hecho. So I started taking piano lessons at 7 years old at Yolanda Hinojosa's piano studio. And she was just the mover and shaker in the piano world in Edinburgh. And all the students who took piano studied with Yolanda Hinojosa. So many, many years of studying piano. And then I started taking piano lessons at the age of 12 or 13 at the university because she felt it was time for me to move on. And as a matter of fact, the first time I stepped on that campus was to go hear a piano recital of Eugenia McMullen, who became my piano teacher. But I went to just check out the place. My daddy dropped me at the Circle of the old auditorium. And I remember walking in, and she was playing this most beautiful piece, which was Granados, La Maja y el Ruiseñor, which became my signature piece, and now I play it all the time because I never forgot the impact of that beautiful piano music when I walked in the hall. And she became my mentor and my piano teacher, along with John Ramo, Dr. John Ramo, who was at the university forever since the music department began. So those were my formative years of studying piano, music history, music theory, and was married along the way to another musician who later became an attorney. But we went to SMU together. Arnulfo Guerra and I, as young married couple, went to SMU and studied music at their music department. Have a master's in piano performance and piano pedagogy from Southern Methodist University. And then later I went back to school to get a doctorate at the University of Oklahoma. But somewhere along the way, I fell in love with Mexican folk music. And actually, I know when it happened because my daddy would take us to Mexico. Every summer we went to visit Mexico City, Palacio de Bellas Artes, Monterrey, and we would hear the mariachis play. So my life was classical music, Mexican folk music, always. The two went hand in hand. So sometime around 1989, I started the mariachi program and continued to play the piano, I've played with the Valley Symphony, with some symphonies in Mexico as well. So the love of piano never leaves. But yes, I've been focused very much on the mariachi program. And I've served different roles at the university. I was chair of music about 7 years. I was dean of the College of Arts and Humanities 10 years, and served as assistant vice president of public art for 5 or 6 years. And now I'm having a lot of fun because I'm assistant to the new dean, Jeffrey Ward, Dr. Ward, and just having a lot of fun sort of rebranding our music offerings and our arts offerings. music, dance, creative writing, art, and they're all being branded under UTRGV Arts. So that's been my focus as well recently. Having a lot of fun. That was a lot.
What was it about your father being inspired to say, this baby here is going to learn how to play the piano? ¿De dónde nació eso?
Okay, well, and that's easy to trace as well, because my grandfather was a preacher, and he built churches all over Texas, and so his all of his children, everywhere he grew up and had churches, there was always a pianist. And so I think my dad grew up in the church, seeing the importance of the pianist, and he just loved classical music as well. So it's interesting, but that just
what was your
born.
grandfather's name?
Canuto Garcia, yes.
And where was your grandfather from?
I believe that's a good question. I believe that he grew up around the Falfurrias area and married my grandmother, who was Farias, from further north in San Isidro area. But all of that area, they rode on horseback, and the two families intermingled, and eventually my grandfather married my grandmother, Farias. And Inocencia was her name. And so he got really involved in church work. She was very ill, and a preacher came by and prayed for her, and he was sold. So he dedicated the rest of his life to preaching the Word of God, and included in that style of leading people to the church and to worship was always music, and of course the piano was central. And I think my dad probably thought that it was vital for me to learn to play the piano. And so,
what did your father do for a living?
Oh, lots of things, a variety of things. As I mentioned, he was a World War II hero, and later came back, and I think he had a restaurant. He had a construction company. He was very clever and creative, super hard worker. So I believe I learned a lot of my tenacity and dedication from him. He just never gave up. Life threw some challenges at him, and he always overcame and had a positive outlook on life.
Did he go to high school?
He did, and he went to college for a couple of years as well.
Was it Edinburgh High School that he went to?
Edinburgh High School,
Yeah.
yes.
And he went to, was it Pan American College?
Yes, it was
maybe?
college at the time, and he met my mom in high school. Yes.
And so your mother was from where?
She was from Yorktown, and then they came to live in Edinburgh when she was around 15 or 16. And there she met my father in high school. And sweetest person you've ever met, just a real good, kind, beautiful person.
So there's all kinds of literature, like historical literature on places like Yorktown and places like in Central Texas, and how they grew and were shaped by the cotton industry. Like people went there because there was cotton and workers were needed. Mm-hmm. Was your mother's family part of that kind of experience?
Absolutely, definitely. I remember talks about picking cotton, and she had a particular fear of spiders because she would run into some as in the cotton fields, and yes, they served whatever community was there as well. My great grandmother was a chef, a cook for a doctor, and so which was interesting because she picked up a lot of the recipes, and he was Polish, so sometimes what we would eat later in life had the roots way back in some Polish doctor in Yorktown. But for example, at Christmas time, our bread pudding was Polish bread pudding.
How about that?
So yeah,
because of that influence.
Mm-hmm.
So what part of town did you grow up with, you and with your family?
I was born on Fifth Street, and I'm still on Fifth Street.
On Fifth Street. So that would
Right.
be okay. So you go 10th is right here,
Uh-huh.
and you go that way. Fifth and what?
Fifth and Hill.
Okay.
Uh-huh.
That's
Right.
kind of an older neighborhood.
It's an older neighborhood. I left for a while and had a couple of homes in different places. But when my mom passed away, my dad didn't want to leave his home. So I moved in with him to take care of him. For many years, I took care of my dad, possibly about eight years, and enlarged the house, added square footage, and we just stayed there.
What year did your mother pass away?
In 1997.
And how old was she?
She was 70.
She was young.
She was very young, and it was a shock. There was no warning. She was there one minute, and the next minute she had a heart attack.
And your father?
He passed away in 2004. He'd lived a little bit longer, 2004. And he was, close to 80 something, 83, 84. But, yes.
Did your father, because you said that they met when they were in high school or in school,
Right.
And so what part of town did they grow up in? Your father there? In like around Hill and Fifth?
It would have been, no, the other side of town.
The other, like on the
Yes.
east side of town?
Yes, east side of town. They went to Lamar, I believe, and then the old Edinburgh High School.
Yes.
Yes, but they did grow up on that side of town, and this is the middle of the war when they were. He volunteered, and he was a senior, I believe. He was 17. He snuck into the army because he was really too young, and she was slightly younger, so he was missing in action, and she was in high school, and just pretty devastated about the whole thing.
What do you mean he was missing in action? What happened?
He was, I mentioned a bottom turret gunner of a B-17. They were shot down and captured by the German army. And he was in a prisoner of war camp for a long time, maybe almost 2 years.
No way.
Yes.
So, like 43, 44, 42,
Yes.
43.
44, and then liberated in 45. Yes, by Patton.
Wow.
And yes, interesting story.
Yeah, okay. So what about that story? Were there stories that he readily shared, or was he more like maybe traumatized by the experience and didn't share it too much? Were there letters that he wrote? Were there things that he kept?
I have a little box of letters that he wrote my mother.
No way.
Yes, I'll share them with you someday. But I think one of my favorite stories
But hang on, those letters. Those are letters that your parents had, that your mother had, and then how did you get them?
He was writing to my mother very regularly, as much as he could. And she would put them in this little wooden box. And I have a little stack of them. And then when she passed away, she shared them, but not, she was very private about her little letters. And so when she passed away, then I had a chance to, and I did go through the little box. I still have it, yes.
You had not read them before, or had you?
Not really. And she would share maybe a little bit. Because he was a good writer. And she said, mira, tu papá escribía muy bien. And she showed me a couple of times.
In English or Spanish?
In Spanish and English. He went back and forth.
Wow.
Yes.
How interesting is that?
Yes. I'll have to show them to you.
Does he write about the horrors of war?
A little bit. Well, not too much, because I don't think they could. So he would just talk about, I'll be moving around a lot. I'll be here. I'll be there. I love you. It's not true what so and so said about me. There's a couple of those.
Is he writing from the prisoner of war camp?
I think it was before.
Before.
Yes, before. Because then, once they captured him, there was nothing, no contact, nothing. So my grandparents and my mother didn't know if he was dead or alive for quite a while. And then they discovered he had been captured, and that he was in a prisoner of war camp. They knew he was, at least they knew he was alive. But he talked about, my favorite story. He says he survived being a prisoner of war through playing the harmonica. Isn't that interesting? He had a pack of cigarettes, and a German officer had a harmonica. He said, hey, I'll trade you. and so he got this little harmonica, and he played, and he was fabulous. When he got home, when we were young, he would play for us, and it was the same harmonica. And then later, I think we lost track of that particular harmonica, but we have others that he had that he played all the time. That's my favorite story.
When you were a kid growing up, and Hogan's Heroes was created, did you ever watch it with your father?
I did. He watched, we went to all of the war movies at the theater in McAllen, the Palace. For some reason, that's where he liked to go. We saw all of the war movies. He was intrigued, I think, perhaps to see how they were portrayed, but I never thought he was particularly traumatized. He was a tough dude. He was a tough kid. And so he was proud of his country and proud of what he had done. Very patriotic.
So your father's World War II experience would have an indelible, impact on you. I mean, you talked earlier about how very patriotic, that sort of thing. But it's not just some sort of rhetoric with you or platitude. I mean, this is something that, before you were born,
Before I
your
was
father
born.
was doing this and writing to your mother, and your mother was part of the experience because of this. Speak to that a little bit more about the profundity of that, if there is that. I mean, it sounds like there is.
Oh, there certainly is. And also my brothers, Bobby and Richard. Absolutely. We just saw him as an incredible mentor and as a force of nature, because at his age, to have survived and to be able to talk about it without any kind of trauma, and even have a sense of humor about it, it was inspiring. It was empowering, and yes, certainly made us aware of sort of a worldview and where America, what role the United States played in world politics, and he talked about the beauty of the countryside. He thought Germany was beautiful. Unfortunately, he had that experience. He talked about England being quite lovely. So imagine those experiences being brought about through being in the service and still being positive about it, even though he had the other trauma. He dug his way out of a prisoner of war camp twice.
He escaped.
He escaped.
And the first time he was caught?
First time he was caught.
And the second time?
The second time, I believe
he was caught again?
He was liberated.
Oh.
That's when I believe that they were liberated, but he dug a tunnel and got out of there and was captured later, not too far away. But that kind of strength and persistence and perseverance and resilience, I believe, was a big impact.
Did anyone ever do an oral history with your father?
I believe we might have. My brothers have collected some information, and I think it's one of my biggest regrets that I didn't do more of that. I wish I had, and I know you do a lot of that, and that's a great thing. But there's some material written down. I believe Richard and Bobby have both have some documentation as well. That can be another plática. We can get it together.
I mean, it's a fascinating
story.
It's a fascinating story, and I mean, I've known you for a number of years, and I did not know that story. So probably a lot of people don't know that story, but it's such, I think, an uplifting story of, as you described, strength and resilience. And I can't help but to think the influence on you and your siblings. I mean, how can it not?
It's huge.
So you must be persistent. You must be resilient. You must be
stubborn,
because you really don't have a choice. I mean, we're not even talking about your mother, and your mother may have been like the anchor of the whole thing.
Absolutely. She had a lot of faith, very calm and encouraging, and yes, she was quite a force of nature in her own way.
So when were you at SMU?
SMU was 1976 through 1978.
Before you went to SMU, the kind of influences that would have been cultural, that would have been artistic, musical on you would have been what? What were the main influences? You talked about your father and the piano.
Right. Uh-huh.
And then you talked about Mrs. Hinojosa. That's a fascinating story. Like,
Uh-huh.
who was she? You know, where was she from? What did she do outside of private, sessions with students? So the kind of influences that you would have had.
Well, starting with her, of course, and she had a large piano studio. Everybody in Edinburgh studied with Yolanda Hinojosa. She was a graduate of the St. Louis Conservatory of Music and was well trained. And so her dream was just to have a nice studio, and it was great. I even taught for her several years as a piano teacher as I got older. But I would say she was a great influence.
So Yolanda Hinojosa would have been your teacher in the 60s and into the early 70s.
Right.
How old was she when she was your teacher?
Wow. She was probably in her 40s and then later 50s.
So this would have been somebody who was born in the 20s?
I believe she might have been born in the early 30s because she was younger than my parents. Maybe
She was
mid 30s.
okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Is she around?
She's passed away, yeah, about maybe 3 or 4 years ago.
Okay.
Mhm.
Wow.
Yes.
And so was she from Edinburgh?
She was Chapa, married Hinojosa. I believe she was from Edinburgh and lived here pretty much all her life except when she was away in school.
At the
school.
St. Louis.
Conservatory of Music.
So she probably went there after Edinburgh High School?
Right. Right.
And she would have gone there in the maybe
Gosh.
late 40s, 50s probably.
Probably.
Mid-50s.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. And so what was it about her?
Well, she believed a lot in teaching us to read well. So my reading skills were good. And we had music theory every week, as well as a piano lesson. We had music theory. And I thought that was really innovative for the time and made a big impact on all her piano students because we were well versed in harmonizing and chord structures, everything aside from learning our piano music. We had music theory. That was amazing. So she gave me a great background and foundation to continue to study piano.
You spoke earlier about the trips your parents took you on, and you went to Bellas Artes, you went to Monterrey and other places. Were you a musician who dabbled in Mexican music up to the age of 17 or 18?
Only enjoyed listening to it.
Only listening.
Only listened. Didn't play, nothing more than just enjoy it.
So like with Las Rancheritas or any of that, you weren't necessarily
No.
connected with it, even though Edinburgh High School, produced some rancheritas.
That's right. And I knew them and later became friends and really interested in their work. But in high school, it was strictly classical music. I was in the choir. That took up all my attention. And then,
What did that do for you in terms of your own sense of cultural identity? The fact that you were in classical.
It's interesting. It was interesting because in church, the music was folk, but it was church folk. It wasn't Mexican folk, even though it still had the rhythms of a polka or a similar style to what Mexican folk would be. But it was. So I would listen to the Mexican folk music at home. And Daddy loved norteño as well, not just mariachi. He loved norteño, conjunto. And so I listened to both. And Mother's Day serenades was usually a norteño group or a group from the area that Daddy would have and bring over. And
so here you are in the back, just kind of observing as a
and
classically
listening.
trained pianist, and you're like
Exactly.
taking all this in.
Yes. And it was cool. He bought a book in Reynosa of Mexican music, and there I did enjoy some Las Golondrinas, La Paloma. He would bring this piano books from Reynosa, and tócalo, mijita. You know, and my reading got even better because I had to read this music for him. And people would come and visit. Tócale la paloma. So he would ask me to play whenever someone came to visit. So and
So
a little bit of Mexican along with the classical.
It was a little bit of pressure for you.
A little bit of pressure.
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
Because I had to play his music as well.
Did you hate those moments or not?
They were annoying. Later, as I think about it, it was beautiful. It was something beautiful. He was encouraging me to play in front of people, and he probably made a big difference in my life that I had that exposure.
On the spot.
On the spot.
So this is it, and I am reminded in a very personal way, because as you know, my daughter Andrea grows up with classical ballet, and it's not until she's in her 20s that she comes to appreciate the Mexican folk dance.
So
you grew up as a classical piano player, and not that you didn't appreciate the other, right? But you really wouldn't get into it until you're later in your 20s or 30s. What was that like for you when you come to see, I got this unbelievable training, classical, and then there's this music that so resonates with the community, and they not only love it, it's like they love it with a passion.
Exactly.
So what was going on in your mind and your heart right about that time? You were probably mid to late 20s, and you're thinking,
this is interesting.
This is interesting.
Well, I tell you, what brought it about is the ballet folklorico, because Frank Munoz, believe it or not, was in my class piano. He studied piano, and while I was teaching there at the university, and so invited me to go see a production, and I did.
But tell who Frank Munoz is.
Munoz was the gentleman, along with his wife Mary, that developed the ballet folklorico. Very recently retired, but
at Pan American University.
Pan American University, and then UTPA. So he invited me to some shows, and I hung out backstage, and I thought, this is fabulous. This is beautiful.
The folklorico dance.
The dance. And then he started doing Spanish dance. And will you play the piano?
Wait, like flamenco or what?
Yes, it was more of the Spanish folk than actual flamenco, something that lends itself to the piano. So I started playing piano on stage during the Spanish dance numbers. So I was
for Frank's students.
For Frank's students in public performances. So that became totally immersed in their world. So Frank would say, "Why don't you start a mariachi?" He said, "We need a mariachi." And I've said,
he just offered it up, like,
yes.
But that's very Frank Munoz, right? He's like,
yes.
"Hey, Dahlia,
give me a mariachi." So I thought, wow, well, maybe so. And I spoke to Miguel Nevares about it, and he thought it was fabulous.
And he was the president.
Super supportive. And so started with very small little group of kids that I started visiting La Jolla, because they had a very strong group. And about the same time as I started McAllen High, Edinburgh High, we all started sharing music, sharing best practices, and just started developing the mariachi program.
And this is 1989,
and then 90.
Wow. So by 1989, and so we've had Amancio Chapa on a program before, not Museum Plática, but a Sunday speaker series, where Amancio and Miguel de los Santos and Ofelia de los Santos. Miguel was the superintendent of schools in La Jolla. Ofelia was the public relations person for La Jolla at the time. Husband and wife, they were working for the school district. Amancio was the president of the school board in the early 1980s, where the way Amancio tells the story is that he was at a school board conference in Austin one day in the very early 80s, probably 80, 81,
Right.
when for the lunchtime entertainment, a mariachi group from one of the local high schools, like Crockett High School or one of those schools, comes out to perform. And Amancio is so taken aback, and he notices that these mariachi kids, the mariachi performers were African American kids, Anglo kids, Asian kids, uno que otro Mexicano perhaps. But Amansio's seeing this and he says, no, we should be doing this. So Amansio's saying, if somebody else can do it, surely this is in the wheelhouse, of who we are down in the valley. It is our cultural experience. It is, our historical kind of experience as well. And so Amancio comes back to La Jolla. He summons Dr. De Los Santos and he says, Dr. De Los Santos, let me tell you what I just saw. I want you to go do this.
Awesome.
So then Miguel goes and he finds, actually he has to talk to the band program. Because there's only band at the time.
Right.
And so they figure it out somehow. They hire somebody else and then, it really becomes, in my mind at least, the genesis in South Texas of this kind of cultural music just being unleashed. And Amancio tells a story of how frustrated he was between, say, 81, 82 and about 85, 86, when he thought that when La Jolla started it, that McAllen would pick up, that other schools would pick up, but they didn't.
Took a while.
It took a while. And this is with superintendents who were friends of Miguel de los Santos's and who said, yes, I'm all about this, but they weren't until La Jolla proved to be so bold and so good that it was undeniable. And then others would then follow suit. But it took a little while. Even for the university, it took a while. I mean, the story you tell is that it was Frank Munoz who put me up to it, right?
Yeah.
And then for you felt what? You felt, oh, yeah, this makes sense.
It made sense. And why not? It's our music, and why not?
What the public schools were doing by 88, 89, what kind of factor would that have been for you in terms of creating a mariachi?
It was important because I had a good friend, Cirito Trevino was at Edinburgh High, and a young lady who was, wish I could remember her name, in McAllen. So we started getting together and looking at music, and we had to write it all down because back then you just couldn't buy it. It wasn't on the market like it is now. So we shared a lot of our thoughts and our music, and we were excited about it. Just thought it was something wonderful, and I visited La Jolla a lot. They were so sweet to me. They had a ton of recordings, and they had music, and mentored me on what to do, and so these schools, as they developed their programs, became feeder programs for the university. So the better they got, the more advanced students I was getting, and so.
Fast forward 30 some years. Is there a public high school anywhere in South Texas that that does not have a mariachi program?
Probably not. No, it's a very strong educational tool. It is. And so I think
if there are 50 high schools in the region, and there's more like 70 or 80 high schools in it. So let's say there's 70 or 80 high schools in the region. That means that there's 70 mariachi directors.
Exactly. Some of the schools still have band directors or orchestra directors that double as mariachi directors, but now the trend is mariachi directors for mariachi programs.
And it's not just one.
Sometimes they have two per school.
Yeah. Right? Yeah.
A JV and a varsity, they call it.
That means that there's probably 100 plus professional jobs for mariachi instructors in some way.
Absolutely.
So when you do the math on that, that's a whole industry. That's a windfall of money.
And they're always calling us from all over the country. Who's graduating? Can you send us a mariachi teacher? Washington State, Chicago, Dallas. These places have called me. Send us people.
Because you probably produce the higher number of graduates in mariachi programs than anybody else, I would think, no?
Absolutely.
I mean, who competes with you? Like, does UT Austin?
No.
UTSA?
No.
University of Houston?
No. They don't. Not
UCLA?
Yet. No. They may have some programs that are older, that have been around But as far as graduating and students who are going out to be mariachi directors, there's no comparison. And we have recently added a Bachelor of Music Education with a mariachi concentration. So when they come out with that degree, they've studied mariachi literature and style and techniques, repertoire. So, and we're graduating them, and they're going out.
34 years ago, when you began to do this, and you talked about Frank Muñoz's influence, you talked about Dr. Nevares being supportive, you talked about La Jolla being so nice and kind and open to you. Could you have imagined?
No, no, absolutely not. And
What could you have imagined? The visionary Dahlia Guerra back in 1989.
it was, I never dreamed. I just never dreamed that it would open so many doors, not only for the students, but for me as well, because as the program got better, I added a real mariachi, Francisco Loera, who became my co-director. And with my skills as a musician, my ear, and his skills as a mariachi, then we started developing a program that really was significant. And so
When did you hire?
I believe he came in 95 as a student. He graduated, went on to get a master's in Spanish. He has a master's in Spanish and some minor masters in music. So then the collaboration was a good one, and just kept on growing the program. But the opportunities for these students, many of them who had never been on an airplane before, and now they're performing all over the U.S.
Like where? That like
Oh my goodness!
spectacular places where they performed.
Yes. Well, we did a private audience for President Obama.
What?
We did
At the
at
White
the
House?
White House. Just he was. We went to perform for.
I mean, it doesn't get any bigger.
It doesn't
than
get
that.
any bigger than that. We went to perform for a signing ceremony, and he was in the building. We were supposed to be in the lobby playing. He was in the next room or somewhere, wherever he lives,
President?
President
Yeah,
Obama, and he heard us playing, and so he's told someone, I want to go hear them. So
It was all that day.
it was all that same moment.
So President Obama is walking through the White House or whatever, and he hears you guys, and he says, "I want a little bit
I want
of
a
that."
little bit of that. So we're in the lobby of the White House, which is really not as big as it looks. It's kind of small. And so they move everyone out. They tell everyone to leave, and they shut the doors, and they left just the mariachi, and he came out of a wall. He came out of a hidden wall door. He came out, and we started playing, and he was dancing along with it and trying to sing along, and he shook every student's hands, and we were tongue-tied. And blah, blah, blah,
This
blah.
was that part of the program when the students woke up that morning. They were not expecting to play for the president.
Not really. They were hoping, because we were going to be in the White House. They kept telling me, are we going to get to play for the president? And it happened. It's almost like we willed it to happen.
Oh, wow.
And that was 2010.
What a
Yeah.
moment.
It was a tremendous moment. It really was. But even more impressive was that they called us out of the clear blue sky. We want UTPA Mariachi to come to the White House. And it didn't come through a talent agent. It didn't come through a congressman. It came through
The White House.
directly from the White House to my telephone. Yeah, inviting me and the group to go play.
And
Yeah,
what
it
did you
was-
do when you got that call? Yeah!
I called Robert Nelson. I said, they want us to go to the White House. Can we do that? And he goes, of course you're going. And I said, well, how do we pay for it? He said, I'll pay for it. So there we go.
That's
And
great.
we did that.
Did he go?
He did not go to that particular one. He couldn't go for some reason. But the chancellor was there at the time. Remember the chancellor?
Cigarro?
Cigarroa was there. He was
Wow.
there. Yes.
Wow.
So that
How
was
about
that was kind of fun. Other places, Kennedy Center.
The Kennedy Center.
Kennedy
You performed at the Kennedy Center.
Kennedy Center, 2012.
Wow.
There was a grant I got from the U.S. Department of Agriculture for the Smithsonian Folklife Festival. It was colleges and community. That was the theme that year. So they invited us. I wrote the grant. I got the money. We went to play it for 2 weeks in the summer of, it was around July 4th at in Washington, D.C. It was very hot.
And so that climaxed with the Kennedy Center, or did you perform
That
at the Kennedy
climaxed
Center?
with the Kennedy Center.
Because you were
yes.
performing outdoors, probably.
We were outdoors, and
Yeah.
then they invited us to play at the
at
Kennedy
the
Center.
Folklife. Wow.
Yeah, yes. So another couple of times at the Kennedy with a folkloric dance company, as well as their accompanists. That
Uh-huh.
was great fun.
That's true.
Hollywood Bowl was one. Santa Barbara Bowl. A fabulous memory that I'll never forget was the Houston Grand Opera, and we premiered the first mariachi opera ever written, Cruzar la Cara de la Luna, along with Mariachi Vargas. They did some performances, and Mariachi Aslan did some performances. And then Chicago Lyric Opera picked it up, and we did it in Chicago with them in 2012. So, and these things just kept popping up.
Yeah, what beautiful experiences for the students.
Absolutely.
And of course, those experiences come to the families as well.
Exactly. And the more we play, people see us there and invite us
Yeah.
to other performances. And the thing also I think is important is that when we go to a city to play, we also do a workshop in the community for students. And very often they're the low-income areas of Chicago and that sort of thing. So I feel like
Yeah, you inspire.
we're
and
inspiring them.
Wow. Wow. What a body of work, eh?
It's been
Yeah.
I've been blessed, and it's been a wonderful wonderful adventure. Really
Yeah.
has.
Yeah. I mean, you should go into some kind of Hall of Fame or something.
Well,
Are you in one?
I think one of my biggest awards is the Orly from Mexico.
Wow.
That comes straight from the president of Mexico, and
That-
that's
How come I didn't know you got
yeah,
that?
it was 3 years ago. 3 years ago. It was pandemic, and they didn't have a big thing. It was kind of a quiet thing, and but yes, it was. That's one of my.
Is this what is
shining
known as the
achievements.
Eagle Award?
There's two, but this Orly has it's about a pathfinder, someone who opens the path.
Oh.
And I have a medal, and it was the presentation from the consulado. They recommend. It goes to the president of Mexico. He chooses a few across the United States, and then everybody at that same time gets their award in different parts of the country.
Who nominated
it was a
you?
thrill. The Mexican consulado. Yeah, here
From
in
McAllen.
McAllen.
Oh my God.
It was a
that's-
thrill, and it was a process. You have to a lot of
And
paperwork.
during the pandemic, did you actually go in to receive it?
I did. Yeah, we did. It was a
And-
small group, and it was at the old church, that small building in McAllen. It's called
Okay.
the Old Church Winery, and they did a ceremony, and it was
Wow.
very moving, very touching.
Well, Dahlia, thank you very much for your body of work. So we're gonna go on break here,
Okay.
and then when we come back, we're gonna talk about Festiva. But as we go on break, I'm gonna be thinking of all these things that I wanted to talk about that I didn't get to ask. But I thought that the way you told your story though is so much about at least the public Dahlia that we know, the public Dahlia. So I'm sure that there's a lot of the private Dahlia that at some point we can get to a little bit more. But I really enjoyed the stories of your mother and your father. I think the
Great,
stories of your father being a prisoner of war are riveting stories. Wow.
Thank you.
All right, so when we come back, we're going to talk about Festiva. All right. So Dahlia, I'm looking at the comments now.
Okay.
Of, the nice things people are saying. Welcome back to Museum Pláticas, friends of the Museum of South Texas History, and also, people from outside of the friendship network of the museum. We appreciate you chiming into this program today. So, Dahlia, as if you didn't do enough with with giving rise to a whole industry in the schools and around mariachi education, it's not the only thing that you have innovated and pioneered and put so much of yourself into. Some years ago, probably somebody gave this to you, right? Or something like that. You would become this founding member of Festiva.
Exactly.
So, what is Festiva? About what time would this start, and what were the conditions around which it was founded?
Okay, so Festiva is the Festival of International Books and Arts, and it is a week-long festival. And it actually was an offshoot of HESTEC way back in 2007. So as HESTEC promoted the STEM fields, engineering, math, etc., the idea was to promote the cultural arts. And so Festiva was born, and it is a week of cultural activities, authors, poets, musicians, concerts, and above all, promoting literacy, having addressed the fact that the literacy rate was alarming. And this came about with Congressman Ruben Hinojosa, who was very passionate about promoting literacy. So he was one of the champions of the literacy aspect of Festiva.
So this is how I've heard this story. Congressman Hinojosa, who also was the force behind the creation of HESTEC, right? Hispanic Engineering, Science, Technology, something like that, education conference, and would lean on, the congressman would lean on the talents, the organizing efforts of Roland Ariola. So Roland would be instrumental in this whole creation of that congressman bringing resources to HESTEC. And that somebody at some point, maybe Roland, thought, hey, we can do something like HESTEC, but for literacy and the arts. Is that kind of the way the story goes?
It's kind of the way the story goes, exactly.
Like, were you in the room when somebody said, hey?
Yes. And Roland, I believe, actually coined the acronym Festiva. So I ran with it, and because I was dean of the College of Arts and Humanities at the time, I was able to pull different presentations and authors and poets from the different departments. And so also the biggest partner I had was South Texas Literacy Coalition. And the literacy half of the program was championed by them. And at the beginning of Festiva, Reading is Fundamental was another organization from Washington, D.C. that was very strong. I believe the first few years of Festiva, we gave away over 30,000 books per year to the community.
Wow.
And that was through RIF and through the South Texas Literacy Coalition, along with Festiva.
Wow.
Isn't that amazing?
Wow. So this was about
2007. 2007, it starts as a full Festiva. 2006, we had a music Festiva. It was strictly just in the music area. But 2007, it encompassed the whole college.
And music, I mean, that's what you knew. That's what you did. You put on performances, musical performances. So it made sense that would have been kind of a bridge year.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So Festiva has become a staple for the university. And is this institutionalized already? Kind of like what HESTEC was institutionalized?
Pretty much so. Yes, pretty much so. And it is. There are presentations and events that happen throughout the university. It's not just in the arts, and we have different presentations from the College of Ed, from the social and behavioral sciences, and on both campuses, in Edinburgh and in Brownsville. So it has grown to encompass the whole University.
So the museum is very happy to participate with
And you're great partners.
with Festiva.
Yes,
Yes,
thank
and
you.
so you send an email, you say, hey, need some submissions. So we say, all right. So Dahlia, these are the submissions. This year, we will be presenting something that we've presented before, but we didn't draw the kind of audience, and we thought, okay, so that was a practice session. So we wanted to do it again. So this year, one of our presentations will be on the letters of Sergeant Alfredo Gonzalez, who wrote like prolifically when he was in Vietnam as a Marine between 1965 and 1968. And his mother, Dahlia Gonzalez, who is now probably 93 years old, she donated 150 letters that her son wrote to her. And so, the way she tells the story is that it was her bedtime reading for 50 years.
Oh.
And so we will talk about those letters and the relationship that we have with the Edinburgh School District, because the Edinburgh School District has contracted the museum to do a series of workshops on letter writing with social studies and language arts teachers. So that's very exciting, that piece of work that we have. We also have a presentation at Festiva on using artifacts, storytelling with artifacts. So Melissa will present that. Melissa is our exhibits and collections coordinator. And we also have a session that Johnny Gonzalez will be facilitating on the issue of the windmill that we have at the Will Looney Legacy Park. And so it's about the historical importance of the windmill, how we've maintained the windmill. Before there was a Chapin, which became Edinburgh, in 1900 there was a windmill that was built right behind where the jail was. The jail wasn't built until 1909, 1910. So when the jail was built, there was a windmill there. And then there was a hurricane or strong winds like in 1910 that knocked that down.
Wow.
And then another one was built. And then through the years, it somehow got phased out. But when the museum restored the jail and also built the Will Looney Legacy Park, the museum decided to build a windmill to honor the history. And it was actually Jimmy McCallum who said, we should have a windmill hill because there was a windmill hill back in 1900.
Wow.
And so we're doing a session on that.
Okay. That's fascinating.
Yeah.
Wow.
So those 3 sessions, last year we did a few sessions at Festiva as well. And so we like the fact that, we partner with you and we partner with the university on this. So tell us a little bit more about Festiva and the impact of Festiva on the community as far as you've been able to determine, through data you've collected and that sort of thing through the years.
Well, the city of Edinburgh is a great partner as well. And with Dustin Michael Sekula, librarian, Leti Leja, we have a community day where we distribute books to the community through South Texas Literacy Coalition. But the whole time we are emphasizing the need for early childhood literacy, and as a matter of fact, we honor and showcase what we call the top readers in Edinburgh and also in adjoining cities. So there is some data that shows reading levels of the elementary schools, and the ones who are at the top of their game in literacy, we honor and we present a plaque at the community festival. So promoting literacy has been the main theme of Festiva. And we've brought some amazing people, amazing performers, poets, authors. And so we're bringing the world to Edinburgh, to the Valley, through Festiva. And the best of the best. And we have a mariachi festival, and we bring the best mariachis that exist. We've brought Mariachi Vargas, we've brought Sol de Mexico, Los Camperos, Mariachi Cobre. The best mariachis in the world, really, we've brought to Festiva. And it's just a chance to showcase our university, our faculty, our artists, our poets, and also we showcase the research that's being done, because many of the sessions talk about faculty research, and the community is invited to participate. Many of them are virtual, so you can pop in if you'd like. And the different areas, we have some just from all the different areas, and I hesitate to start going one by one, but if you get on the website, which is utrgv.edu/festiva, you can see the whole gamut of different presentations that are happening throughout the week. One of our amazing partners, and it was interesting that this relationship started way back in 2007. Do you remember John Edwards? He was a vice president here.
Yes.
Well, he had a close relationship with someone on the Texas Book Festival board. So we became partners. By 2008, they started a Reading Rock Stars program. And we send authors to 6 different public schools. And the entire school comes out, they come together, and the author reads his book, signs the book, and each child in that school gets a book from that author. So throughout the years, 17 years times 6 schools times 400 kids per school, that's a lot of impact on kids, inspiring kids in the public schools, little ones. This is elementary level, and they go home with their book, and hopefully we've made an impact on literacy in that manner. And
So tell us when Festiva happens.
it happens usually the first week of March. This year it's going to start Friday, the 24th. Gosh, it's this coming Friday.
Wow.
At the Dustin Michael Sekula Library. This year, the community festival takes place there and starts at 6 p.m. And there'll be authors and artists and food trucks and books, a lot of books. South Texas Literacy Coalition distributing books. It's a great opportunity for the whole family to come out and enjoy what the city has to offer in the arts and cultural arts and culture, and again, promoting literacy, always promoting literacy. We're going to recognize those schools that are doing well in reading. And then on Saturday, we have the South Texas Literacy Symposium. Now, this is another partnership that we have with Literacy Texas. I hadn't mentioned them. They're a great partner. And we put on a symposium at UTRGV Ballroom. About 100 people attend. Literacy providers, nonprofits, teachers, librarians, and we talk about best practices, techniques for promoting literacy. And it's a very, I believe, an impactful day for the Valley as well.
And that is on the
25th.
25th.
This
That's
coming
February
Saturday.
25th. This Saturday. Okay.
9 a.m. And you can sign up for that symposium on South Texas Literacy, actually at the Literacy Texas website, or on my website as well. So then the week starts.
Yeah,
And
with all kinds of presentations.
All kinds of
Yeah.
presentations and concerts. We have a fabulous pianist coming on a, what day is it? On Tuesday. An internationally renowned pianist, Robert Satterley is his name. And I didn't even mention the art exhibits. So many art exhibits at our different art galleries, plus some virtual ones with the Center for Latin American Arts is another wonderful partner, and they have some fabulous art exhibits as well. So,
Well,
gosh, so much.
in a very impromptu way, I'll also say that we have a beautiful and unique art exhibit of the artwork of José Cisneros,
Wonderful.
the great Borderlands artist. And so we will have that for the next 2 to 3 months.
Wonderful.
And so that is on the second floor of the 1910 jail. There's a big room there that we have that's called the Cell Block Gallery.
Wow.
And so encourage, it's not in the program, but we should have put it in the program. It
should've.
didn't occur to me, but it just got on the program.
It's on the
because
program.
The José Cisneros exhibit, come and enjoy it at the museum.
Wonderful.
So, Dahlia, what are we missing? What have we not said about you or about Festiva that just needs to be said before we sign off?
Well, I have to invite you to the final event, which is the Mariachi Festival. And we have a vocal competition on Saturday and ensemble competition on both Friday and Saturday. There's a workshop Friday all day. And these kids are amazing. We have finalists around 30 finalists from all over the Valley that are going to compete on that Saturday at 1 p.m. at the Performing Arts Complex. And then there's a big show at night.
That would be Saturday the 4th?
The 4th.
Okay.
Saturday the 4th. And this Mariachi Festival is March 3rd and 4th. The evening of March 4th, we have a huge concert with Mariachi Sol de Mexico and all the winners of the competitions, and Mariachi Atzlan as well. So
Wow.
we hope the community comes out and joins us. Tickets are available at our box office at 956-3881. 956-665-3881 is our box office. So please call and reserve your ticket. And all of that information is online. So please come and enjoy any of these sessions. Enjoy the art exhibits. Come to the museum. And there's some events that are virtual. Would love to have all of the community take advantage of this week and really immerse yourselves in arts and culture.
That's terrific. Dahlia, thank you so much, for your lifetime of work and commitment, and I think this morning especially for sharing your story.
Thank you so much for having me.
Okay.
Appreciate it.
All right. Okay, so this is, I think, the end of our Museum Plática for February 2023. So look out for the next Plática. We publicize that through our social media platforms, through Facebook and through other platforms as well. And thank you also for supporting the Museum of South Texas History. So until next time, everybody take care.